It happened on a Wednesday. The lobby of the dealership was still dark, the morning sun barely cutting through the glass doors when security walked in. My name is Lucas McAllister, 43 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I was senior sales director at McAllister Drive, a dealership in Asheville my father spent 3 decades building from scratch. I wasn't late. I wasn't failing. I had trained every team, built every customer relationship, and never missed a target in 16 years. But now, I stood across from Gavin, my younger brother by 5 years. 3 days into inheriting the company, and he was already behind our father's desk. Freshly painted walls, minimalist furniture, none of Dad's old hunting photos in sight. "Your sales style is outdated, Lucas," Gavin said, barely glancing up. "We need velocity now. Conversions, not handshakes." I didn't argue. Just nodded as Marcus from security, whose son I helped get his first car last spring, awkwardly packed my things into a cardboard box. The loyalty meant nothing now. "You'll get a month's severance," Gavin added. Professional courtesy. Professional courtesy. From my own brother. I carried the box outside and set it gently on the hood of my truck. The McAllister Drive sign caught the rising light, bold and proud. And now, no longer mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Naomi at Ridgepoint Motors. "Meeting still good for 2 p.m.? I stared at the screen. "Absolutely," I replied. "Just became fully available." And that's when I smiled, really smiled, for the first time that day. If you've ever built something with your whole heart only to watch it get stripped away, this story's for you. And if you're new here, subscribe for more stories of quiet strength and redemption. It helps more than you know. The parking lot was quiet as I pulled away from McAllister Drive, the cardboard box shifting slightly on the passenger seat with every turn. My hands gripped the wheel, but my mind was already 3 steps ahead. 2 p.m. with Naomi at Ridgepoint Motors. That meeting had originally been scheduled to talk parts ordering. Now, it was going to change everything. 3 days before Gavin fired me, I had signed Ridgepoint's distributor agreement, quietly, cautiously, and without telling a soul. They had approached me directly after years of partnership, impressed by how I'd helped build our dealership's reputation across the Blue Ridge region. Not Gavin. Me. The ink on the paperwork was barely dry, but the timing couldn't have been better. Gavin was too busy rebranding everything to notice supplier relationships shifting beneath his feet. Dad was on a solo fishing trip in Wyoming, unreachable by phone. Nobody in that showroom had a clue what was coming. At the next light, I glanced into my rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of the dealership fading behind me. Gavin was already in the showroom, talking animatedly to a young guy in a tailored suit, my replacement, probably. I watched as he gestured confidently, as if he already belonged there. Gavin spotted my truck from the glass and gave me a smug little wave. I returned it. Calm, steady. He had no idea that within 2 weeks, every vehicle his sales team would need would go through me. My father, Robert McAllister, started the dealership 35 years ago with nothing but 10 used trucks, a rented lot, and a handshake reputation. My mom handled the books from our dining table, while Dad worked the lot from sunrise to sundown, rain or shine. I joined him right after college. No titles, no ego, just washing cars, answering phones, and learning every inch of the operation from the ground up. Gavin, on the other hand, took a different path. He went to business school out east, talked about scale, automation, vertical integration, all the buzzwords. When he finally came back 8 years ago, Dad lit up. "Both my sons under one roof," he said with pride. Legacy secured, he believed. But Gavin and I were never aligned. Where I saw customers, he saw metrics. Where I valued names and stories, he saw conversion funnels and upsell percentages. "They're not family, Lucas," he told me once. "Transactions." Dad never chose sides. "Different strokes for different folks," he used to say, trying to keep the peace. But I felt the shift, subtle at first. Gavin pushed for faster turnover, stricter quotas, fewer follow-ups. The personal touches started disappearing. Handwritten thank you notes, check-in calls, even the Christmas cards we used to send out. And the tension? It didn't come from fights. It came from silence. Long pauses in meetings, shrinking space, fewer decisions in my hands. It all came to a head last December when Dad mentioned retirement over dinner. He'd just turned 65, said his back was bothering him. I thought he was going to announce a joint leadership plan, me and Gavin, side by side. Instead, he looked across the table and said, "Gavin's got some sharp ideas for the future." I just nodded, but something in me froze. By February, the paperwork was signed. Dad officially transferred ownership to Gavin, with the understanding that I'd stay on as senior sales director. "He respects you, Lucas," Dad had said. "He knows what you bring to the table." I wanted to believe that. I needed to. But almost immediately, things began to shift. My office, once near the front with a view of the lot, was reassigned to a smaller space near the service bays, the sales team I'd trained for over a decade. Half were quietly moved under Gavin's direct oversight. My login credentials to our supplier systems no longer worked. When I asked, Gavin shrugged. "Just streamlining communication," he said. Then came the meeting with Ridgepoint Motors, our biggest supplier. We'd moved more of their vehicles in the last 5 years than any other dealership in western North Carolina. Gavin was tied up with the bank, so I took the meeting solo. That's when they made their offer. Not to McAllister Drive, but to me, personally. "You've built something rare, Lucas," said Jack Carver, their VP of sales. "Real loyalty, real trust. That doesn't come from spreadsheets." I remember sitting in that quiet office, staring at the distributor contract Jack slid across the table. Regional control of 14 dealerships. First access to inventory. Better hours, more autonomy, less politics. I didn't answer right away. I asked for time. That weekend, I walked the lot alone, remembering how many weekends I'd missed with my own family, how many customers came back just because they remembered my name, or I remembered theirs. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was weighing legacy, and what it really meant to protect it. The following Friday, I was heading toward Gavin's office with a folder of monthly sales reports when I stopped just outside his door. I heard his voice, sharp, dismissive, on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but once I heard my name, I froze. "We'll clean house once Dad's fully out of the picture," Gavin said, laughing lightly. "New team, new style. None of that soft touch stuff Lucas does. He's great with handshakes and holiday cards. But he's stuck in 2005. The folder slipped a little in my hand. He'll get phased out. Quietly. It won't be a scene." I stood there. The numbers I'd spent hours compiling suddenly meaningless. 16 years. Birthdays missed. Anniversaries postponed. Snowstorms I shoveled just so a customer could test drive a used pickup. All of it being reduced to soft touch. I didn't walk into that office. I turned around, went back to mine, and locked the door behind me. The distributor contract from Ridgepoint was still in my desk drawer. I took it out and laid it flat. My hands didn't shake as I signed it. Then I scanned every page and emailed them straight to Jack Carver. Subject line: I'm in. Jack called me within minutes. Glad to have you. When can you start? I glanced at the calendar on my wall. Give me 3 days. I didn't need time to transition. I needed just enough to clear my desk and quietly download everything I had built. I spent that weekend moving like a ghost through the building. No announcements, no sudden moves. Just quiet goodbyes to routines I'd built over a lifetime. By Monday, the paperwork had cleared. My distributor credentials with Ridgepoint Motors were active. I had full back-end access, allocations, pricing tiers, shipping schedules, and with it, control over vehicle flow to 14 dealerships across the region, including McAllister Drive. I left early that morning, dressed the same as always, parked in my usual spot. Gavin didn't even look up when I walked in. He was too busy prepping for a supplier review, one he'd soon learn would never happen. 15 minutes later, I was out the front door with my things. No argument, no blow-up. Just the final snap of a chapter closing. I didn't drive home. I went straight to Ridgepoint's regional office. Jack met me in the lobby with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't feel forced. "Your office is ready," he said, nodding toward a glass-walled room down the hall. It wasn't glamorous. Bare desk, 2 chairs, and a map of the territory pinned with color-coded markers. But it was mine. A small team greeted me. Logistics manager, scheduler, fleet coordinator, all efficient, all sharp. Jack sat me down, walked me through the allocation system. I was now the gatekeeper, deciding who got what, when, and how fast. Every dealership had to go through me, even McAllister Drive. He looked me in the eye and said, "Take your time, Lucas." No rush. But I felt it, the shift, the clarity. For the first time in months, I wasn't on defense anymore. I was building something again, just not where they expected. By Thursday afternoon, the call came, just as I knew it would. "Lucas, it's Vanessa from accounting." Her voice was hushed, almost nervous. "Gavin's losing it. We can't get any inventory orders confirmed. The system keeps flagging everything for review." I leaned back in my chair, looking at the territory map on the wall. That sounds like a supplier issue. That's why I'm calling. Gavin's been trying to reach Ridgepoint directly, but no one's giving him a straight answer. They keep redirecting. I paused for a second. I remembered Vanessa's loyalty. 12 years at McAllister. She didn't deserve this chaos. "I don't work there anymore," I said softly. She was quiet. Then, "I know. But our showroom's half empty. People are waiting. We're running out of options." "I wish I could help," I said gently. "He'll need to follow the proper distributor process like everyone else now." 2 hours later, Gavin called me directly. I let it go to voicemail. His tone, as expected, was more demand than request. He accused me of messing with the ordering system, said I needed to fix what I broke before I left, that he didn't have time for games. The next morning, I called back. Professional, measured. "Have you spoken to your Ridgepoint representative?" "They keep redirecting me. I need 16 vehicles by Tuesday, Lucas. What did you do to our account?" "I didn't do anything to your account, Gavin." "Then why is everything locked up the second you walked out that door?" I let the silence stretch for a beat. "Maybe," I said, "you should ask the regional distributor." "I've been trying," he snapped. "No one will tell me who it is." I took a slow breath, steady and quiet. "Me, Gavin." The line went dead quiet. "You're joking," and finally said, "That's not possible." "It's already done," I replied. "Ridgepoint brought me on as Western Regional Distributor last week. All vehicle allocations in your territory go through my office now." He let out a short, humorless laugh. So what? You're holding my inventory hostage? That's illegal. Number its standard procedure. You're a new owner. First-time orders are flagged for review. I'll call Dad. He's in Wyoming, I said. Off-grid, remember? This is because I fired you. You're trying to get even. No, Gavin. This is me doing my job, the one you pushed me toward. Your dealership will be treated like every other account in my region. No special treatment. His tone shifted, urgency creeping in. What does that mean exactly? It means your first big inventory order has been flagged. I need to assess dealership status and performance under new leadership. It's protocol. For how long? I looked at the calendar tacked to my wall. 2 weeks, maybe 3. 3 weeks? We'll be operating on fumes? I said nothing. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Then, quieter. Lucas, this is Dad's business. He built it for both of us. I remember. My voice stayed calm even. But like you said, times are changing. You wanted aggressive strategy, not relationships. This is what that looks like. You son of a... I'll review your file personally, I said, cutting in. Have a good day, Gavin. I hung up before he could say another word and stared at the silent phone in my hand. The feeling wasn't triumph. It was something colder, something final. The phone rang again almost instantly. Dad's name. I hesitated before answering, knowing what was coming. Lucas, what the hell is going on? His voice was tight, confused. Gavin says you're blocking his inventory. That true? I turned to face the window, trying to find the right words. I'm not blocking anything, Dad. I work for Ridgepoint now. Gavin let me go last week. A long pause. He said you quit, said you took a better offer and walked out without a word. I exhaled, the weight of that lie hitting deeper than I expected. He had security escort me out, Dad. Called it professional courtesy. I have the paperwork, if you want to see it. The line went quiet again. I could hear him breathing. Could almost picture him sitting on the porch of that Wyoming cabin, eyes closed, trying to piece this all together. And now you're in charge of his inventory? I'm the regional distributor. I didn't plan for it to overlap like this, but yes. His order is flagged like any new ownership account would be. Standard Ridgepoint protocol. So you're punishing him? I'm doing my job, I said. The same job I've done for 16 years, just from a different desk. Another pause. Longer this time. Then quieter, disappointed. This is the business I built for both of you, Lucas. I closed my eyes. I know, Dad. I gave it everything I had. And now you're tearing it apart. I'm not the one who started that. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was heavier than that. It sounded like something breaking. Finally, Dad said, I'm flying back tomorrow. Then he hung up. Jack knocked once, then stepped into my office, his expression unreadable. Everything okay? He asked. Family stuff, I said, setting my phone face down on the desk. He nodded slowly. I figured something was going on. Shane Callahan's been calling our main line nonstop, demanding expedited service, inventory priority, threatening to escalate. I didn't respond right away. Just sat there, staring at the Ridgepoint inventory portal glowing quietly on my screen. When we brought you on, Jack continued, we knew this might get personal. But we also knew loyalty runs both ways. There was something different in his tone. I turned toward him. There's something I haven't told you, he said. Gavin approached us 3 months ago. Told us once he took over McAllister, he'd be switching suppliers. I blinked. What? Said our pricing was too high, our logistics too slow. Gave us 30 days to beat Nova Automotive's rates, or he'd move the whole dealership over. I felt a chill ripple through me. Nova, the low-cost competitor known for weak warranties and worse service. Everything Dad built McAllister Drive to not be. He never told me, I said quietly. He didn't think he needed to. We've seen it before, new ownership, short-term profit plays, fast wins to look good on paper. Jack crossed his arms. We didn't approach you to spite him, Lucas. We did it because your relationships meant something. Because your father built something rare. And we'd rather keep it in the family. Just the right side of it. He left the room, leaving me with nothing but the glow of the screen. And a deeper understanding of what Gavin had truly planned all along. I sat motionless long after Jack left, staring at Gavin's pending order on my screen. The truth settled in slowly, heavier than I expected. He hadn't just fired me. He'd planned to dismantle everything our father had built. Quietly, methodically. A supplier switch wasn't just business. It was betrayal. Nova's inventory was cheaper, sure, but at the cost of quality, reputation, and the hard-earned trust our community had placed in McAllister Drive for decades. And it explained everything. The way Gavin kept pushing for faster turnover, cutting back on service follow-ups, eliminating the personalized touches. He was stripping the heart out of the business to make it look good on paper. Polished numbers, short-term profit, long-term collapse. But now I saw the full picture. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about preservation. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying every decision Gavin had made since taking over. Every corner cut, every tradition ignored, every value discarded. I wasn't going to burn the place down. I was going to save what was left. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep. Drove to the office early. The East Coast dealerships were already stirring, so I made calls. Cross-checked allocation reports. Reviewed client feedback. By 7 o'clock, I had it. A complete view of how McAllister Drive ranked within the Ridgepoint network, and where it was heading if Gavin's plan went through. The numbers were stark. If he switched to Nova, customer satisfaction would nosedive within a year. And by then, the McAllister name wouldn't mean much at all. At 11:30, I pulled into the lot at Hector's Grill, a quiet diner on the edge of town. Neutral ground. Dad was already there, seated by the window, nursing a black coffee he hadn't touched. He looked older than I remembered. Not tired exactly. Just weathered. Like someone who'd felt the crack forming in the foundation, but didn't know how deep it ran. I slid into the booth across from him without saying much. The silence stretched a beat longer than comfortable. Your brother tells a different story, he said finally. I figured he would. I reached into my folder and slid the termination paperwork across the table. Dad skimmed it, jaw tightening. Then I handed over the Nova Automotive documents, supplier quotes, draft contracts, even the emails Gavin had requested weeks before the ownership transfer. What am I looking at? He asked. Gavin's plan. He wanted to dump Ridgepoint, gut the follow-up service, move cheap volume with bigger margins, and then sell. Sell? Dad's voice dropped. I nodded. 3 dealership groups have already been contacted for valuations. He was building a paper turnaround story. Make it look shiny, then cash out. Dad leaned back, rubbing his eyes. That's not what I built. No, I said. What he's turning it into. He looked at me for a long moment, searching. And what are you doing now? Strangling his orders to punish him? I opened the final folder and laid out my proposal, one I'd spent all night building. A path forward. Not just for me, For the business. For the name. A premium Ridgepoint partnership. Higher margin models. Loyalty programs. Service bundles. The very things that had built McAllister Drive in the first place. Just refined. Gavin won't go for this, Dad muttered. No, I said, but you still own the property. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You want me to evict my own son? I want you to give him a choice. 2 days later, we sat around the long table in the dealership's conference room. Dad at the head, Gavin to his right, and me across from him. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Martha, Dad's longtime attorney, broke the silence by sliding 3 folders across the table. Option 1, she began, placing the first in front of Gavin. You remain the owner of McAllister Drive, under a revised lease agreement. Conditions include maintaining Ridgepoint Motors as your exclusive supplier, upholding service standards, and honoring customer satisfaction benchmarks. Gavin didn't touch the folder. His jaw clenched. His eyes shot daggers across the table. Option 2, Martha continued, calm as ever. You sell your ownership stake back to Robert and Lucas at fair market value, adjusted for recent disruptions in inventory and performance. Gavin's knuckles whitened. This is extortion. This is business, I said, echoing the words he'd thrown at me weeks earlier. Martha didn't flinch. Option 3, you retain full ownership but vacate the premises. Robert will terminate your lease in 30 days. Gavin turned to Dad, voice low, almost pleading. You'd really do this? Evict your own son? Dad looked straight at him. You lied to me. You fired your brother behind my back. You planned to flip the business like some disposable asset. So yes, I would. Gavin stood abruptly, pacing the length of the room. All this, just because I wanted to modernize? No, Dad said softly. All this, because you forgot what made us different. Silence fell. Gavin turned to me, breathing hard. How much? Fair market, I said. You'll walk away clean. Start something new on your own terms. He stared at the second document, unmoving. Then, without a word, he sat, picked up the pen, and signed. No theatrics, just ink on paper. And with that, the chapter closed. 6 months later, the sign above the glass doors read, McAllister and Son. The showroom buzzed again, not just with foot traffic, but with energy. Families test drove SUVs, longtime customers stopped in just to say hello, and the service department was booked nearly a month out. We hadn't just recovered, we'd redefined the business. Dad came in 3 days a week now. He didn't handle paperwork anymore. He greeted people, told stories, shook hands. It suited him. Less pressure, more presence. There was a lightness in him I hadn't seen in years. As for Gavin, we hadn't heard much. Last I knew, he'd relocated to Phoenix and joined a national auto chain in some executive role. No bitterness, just distance. Maybe it was better that way. One Thursday morning, Jack from Ridgepoint stopped by. He walked the floor slowly, nodding as he took in the refreshed layout, the new lighting, the stacked line of Ridgepoint's premium models near the front. Looks good, Lucas, he said. We're moving inventory faster than we can restock, I replied. He grinned. Relationships, like I told you. I nodded, like my father told me. Long before that? Later that evening, as we closed up, I caught Dad standing beneath the new sign. His eyes weren't misty, just thoughtful. He placed his hand on the glass door and looked back inside. You know, he said, I always hoped it would say McAllister and Son someday. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He turned to me and added, I was wrong about a lot, Lucas. I waited. I thought your way was the soft way. Turns out, it was the strong one all along. We locked up in silence that night. No ceremony. Just the soft click of keys and the familiar sound of the metal shutter rolling down over the front doors. Dad walked ahead toward his truck. But just before he opened the door, he paused. "You could have destroyed him, you know," he said, not turning around. "Cut him off completely. Let the lot go empty. He wouldn't have recovered." I stepped up beside him, watching the reflection of the building in the side window. "Wouldn't have been right." He gave a slow nod, eyes still forward. "That's why you're standing here, and he's not." The words sat heavy between us, not triumphant, but rooted in something deeper. Respect, maybe. Recognition. Or just the quiet acknowledgement that power and integrity don't always walk together. But they should. After he pulled away, I stood for a moment in the empty lot, the night air cool against my skin. The building stood quiet but steady, a silhouette against the stars. We hadn't built this place on revenge. We'd rebuilt it on something far older, far stronger, doing right by people, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Saturday morning sunlight spilled across the showroom floor as I finished setting up the weekend displays. Family-friendly sedans on one side, premium Ridgepoint SUVs on the other. The place felt alive again, not just with movement, but with meaning. Out on the lot, I spotted Dad chatting with a young couple, their toddler wriggling in a car seat while they inspected a mid-size SUV. I didn't need to hear the conversation. I knew exactly how it went. He'd point out the safety features, talk about the engine like it was an old friend, then hand them his business card and say, "Call me if you have any questions," even after hours. Some things didn't need changing. Inside, a boy about 16 waited quietly near the service counter while his mom handled paperwork. I struck up a quick conversation, asked what he liked in a first car. His eyes lit up. Same age I was when Dad taught me how to drive stick shift behind the service bays out back. By noon, the lot was buzzing. Not chaotic, just steady, familiar, whole. Back in my office, I looked up at the wall, at the framed photo of Dad from the early days, standing next to the first 10 trucks he ever sold. Below it now hung a second frame, one with both of us, arms crossed, smiling in front of the new sign, McAllister and Son. Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you protect. And sometimes rebuild, brick by brick, decision by decision, quietly, relentlessly, the way it should be. It was a slow Tuesday when I found it. I'd been organizing the back cabinets in Dad's old office, clearing out outdated manuals, supplier folders, and a stack of dusty service logs. That's when I noticed a binder tucked behind a row of year-end reports. Black leather, worn edges, and a small white label on the spine that simply read, "If I'm gone." I sat down at his old desk and opened it. Inside were customer letters, some handwritten, some typed, thanking Dad for everything from late-night repairs to loaner cars during emergencies. One note was from a single mother who said Dad once gave her a used sedan for half price because she looked like she needed a win. Page after page, names, dates, little scribbled notes in his handwriting. And then, near the back, a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front. I hesitated, then opened it. "Lucas, if you're reading this, I'm not around anymore. And if I know you, you're still trying to do right by everyone. It's your greatest strength and your biggest burden." The letter went on. Reflections, regrets, hopes for both me and Gavin. He never picked a side. He just asked us not to forget the reason he built the place. So people would have one spot in this world where honesty still meant something. I read it twice, then carefully closed the binder, set it back in its place, and turned off the light. Legacy isn't a name on a sign. It's the choices we make when no one's watching, and the promises we keep long after someone's gone.